All right. Thank you all for coming today, especially those of you that actually over your 4 hours and you still came. So I really appreciate you guys coming out. That's right. And for those of you on YouTube, I'm just going to do a brief introduction. I'm Ken McCloud. I'm the assistant principal, one of 3 assistant principals here at Howard. This is my first year at Howard. Prior to that, I started my career out at Wyandanch, where I taught special education, 1511 setting, and then I moved on to administration, where I went to become assistant principal at Eastern Suffolk BOCES, where I spent the last 8 years, and it's really where I got my background really deep, richly into behavioral management. And the course that I'm going to teach you guys today is CPI, and it's really about de-escalation and really how to de-escalate students when they are erratic, when they're acting irrational, and also when they're acting out, and also when they are disrespectful and talking back to you. And as aides and monitors, a lot of times you deal with the students, and you deal with them a lot, and they'll give you an attitude. It could be something simple, and they take their frustrations out on you. So this course is basically to just equip you with some tools on how to respond to student behavior, how to react. We're going to talk about something called the integrated experience. And what that is how our behavior influences the behavior of the students in our care. So without ado, we're going to get started. All right, so our first slide, and for those of you on YouTube, you probably can't see the slideshow, so I'll make sure I talk loud. But the first question is, what is de-escalation? Anyone in the crowd, do you want to answer that? Anyone? What is de-escalation? What does that mean?
Basically, if there's a situation going on, instead of antagonizing you, bringing it up, you want to bring it down.
That's right. She said if there's a situation going on, instead of antagonizing and bring it up, you really want to kind of calm them down and bring the students down. Excellent. Anybody want to add anything to that explanation? Okay. All right, so de-escalation is just that. It's the reduction on the intensity of a conflict, which are a particularly violent situation. So basically, you want to de-escalate people. You want to bring them down, as you said. This isn't in the notes part. This is just kind of just an introduction, but I'll let you know once we get to the notes. And those of you on YouTube, if you printed out that worksheet that goes along with this, you can kind of fill it in as you go along, or just kind of have a guide. So when you are the facilitator in de-escalation, your main focus is to remain calm, don't yell, be non-judgmental, use rational detachment, and not take anything personally. Now that's a lot, but that is so easily said, but so hard to do, right? Because a lot of times when someone is out of control and they're yelling and screaming, it's hard to remain calm, because a lot of times you either freeze or you take it personally. Like, who are you talking to? You don't talk to me that way. And then it just kind of, instead of de-escalating, it escalates the students or the person in crisis, and it makes matters worse. So it's really, focus is not to yell and be non-judgmental, because when someone's in a crisis and they see the way you react to them, if you snarl, if you suck your teeth, that irritates them even more. And it's a lot of times like, oh, here we go again, this kid's acting up again. They see that, and then internally they act out even more. So just kind of really be aware of how you present yourself when you're dealing in a situation. Next, anger is a sign that a student is in distress or experiencing fear or frustration. A lot of times, especially as aides and monitors, you get the blunt of the student's frustration, because you're the first one there. They take it out on you. You have nothing to do with it. But again, the students see you as first. But that's fear and frustration and distress that they're feeling, and then they're just putting that on you. So that's important to realize. In the heat of a student's frustration, it may not be possible to reason with them or problem solve with them or someone enraged. Sometimes you just have to let that enraged person go. You're almost like the lid has to pop off. And a lot of times when the kid's out of control, you're like, calm down. I don't want to calm down. Or they'll say some choice words. Depending on the environment, you almost got to let them blow that steam off. Because a lot of times staff will intervene when students are in that heat of the frustration. And then depending on what type of students, if it's a special education student, they may hit you, they may push you, they may attack you, right? And now it becomes a student attacked me, which they did, but a lot of times if you just kind of let them vent and blow that lid and then come in, you can calm them down a little better. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. Effective communication skills are key to setting and resolving de-escalation situations. So you really got to be able to communicate. Like, I hear you, I know you're upset. I understand. If I was you, I'd be upset that way. let the student know that you're here, and then a lot of times that'll help. Next, and the values that underpin this course with CPI is that we always want to take care of our students. We want to promote their welfare. We want to provide safety for them. And we want to provide security. So CPI, these are the values that underpin the course is care, welfare, safety, and security, because that's the reason why we're in this education, and in education, is to care for students. And again, today's an abbreviated version. This is really a 6-hour course. However, I'm going to give it all to you in 1 hour. We're going to truncate it. We're going to make sure we're not staying here for 6 hours. Our guys on YouTube are like, oh, I'm signing off right now. All right, so now when we're dealing with students with behavior, they tend to exhibit 4 major types of behavior, and this is going to be in your package. So when you come along a student, the first time you'll see a student, they have anxiety, all right? And then they typically go from anxiety to defensive, all right? And then they move on from defensive to risk behavior. This is when they can get physical, okay? And then next, after this all done, is tension reduction. This is when the student feels sorry or they feel bad for what they did. Okay, so I'm going to go a little detail into each one of these. What anxiety is, what defensive behavior is, what risk behavior, and tension reduction. And when students exhibit each one of these behaviors, I'm going to give you some skills and some strategies on how to deal with those students in that specific time of crisis. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about, so we're going to define the 4 types of behavior and how staff should approach that. And in CPI, this is called the Crisis Development Model and the Integrated Experience. So I'm going to get a little more detail than that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is anxiety, right? So anxiety is a change in behavior. You can write this down if you want. All right. So what are some examples, and a lot of you work with special education students, correct? What are some examples of anxiety? What does a student do when they exhibit anxiety? Anybody want to give an example?
Being angry.
They get angry, okay. What are some of the things that they physically do?
They pace back and forth.
That's right, she said they pace back and forth.
So they walk back and forth, that's the defensive.
That's right, they walk back and forth. That's kind of like, it could be going into the defensive, but pacing and walking back and forth, something is starting to agitate them, okay? And some examples, you said it, pacing, tapping their fingers, fidgeting, biting nails, or extreme nervousness. So when you see a student in this state of mind, as a staff member, the first thing you want to be for this student is supportive, okay? So you want to be supportive to the students during this phase and use empathic, non-judgmental approach. So if a student's exhibiting anxiety, the last thing you want to say is, get over it, kid. You know, you're only 11, 12, or 13, you haven't seen stress yet, right? That's what you want to tell them, but you don't want to tell a kid that, or anyone that going through anxiety, because you just want to be supportive. Listen, it's okay. A lot of times in this situation, you may want to go to the kid, especially if you're their aide, and say, listen, you think you want to go on a walk right now? Let's go on a walk. Because you may see, and if your students start to exhibit anxiety, and if you don't kind of remove them or be supportive, what do you think the next phase is going to happen? What's going to happen? You're going to get angry and they're probably going to explode, right? So when you see this anxiety, you really want to be supportive. And a lot of times, you all know your students much better than even the teachers, right? Because you're with them all day. And I think when I first started, someone said, oh, I'm just an aide, I'm just a monitor. I said, no, you're not just an aide and a monitor. You guys are so important. Being a special educator my whole career, aides, monitors, teacher assistants, you guys are so important. So never say that you're just an aide and a monitor, because you know these students better a lot of times than some teachers, simply because you're with them every day, special. So you can know when your students exhibit anxiety, you want to be supportive, you want to remove them from that situation, or you want to talk to them calmly and try to really de-escalate in that situation. But sometimes it doesn't happen, right? That student now becomes defensive. So defensive behavior, this is when a student may start to lose rationality, they may become passive aggressive, they become belligerent, and they challenge authority. So we've seen this a lot, right? So what are some examples of a defensive student? I think the picture had the talk to the hand. What are some defensive behaviors that you guys have seen in your travels?
Sometimes they shut down.
Yep, they'll shut down. They talk back.
Talk back.
Yes.
Disrespectful.
I've gotten.
Disrespectful?
Yeah, I've gotten the finger a couple times.
Yeah, they give you a finger,
And
yeah.
it's a free country.
Uh-huh.
It's a free country.
That's right.
It's a free country. You
Uh,
know, we don't have to listen to you.
That's right. A lot of responses was that students talk back, they get defensive, they actually gave the finger, they say it's a free country, we don't have to listen to you. Those are all forms of defensive behavior. And some of the examples are refusal, which we just said, shouting, cursing, and non-compliance. And this is very typical of a student that has ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. Students that have ODD, this is a classic case. They're so good at being defensive that you'll never win a power struggle with a kid with ODD. I've been doing this for 21 years and they're undefeated, okay? They'll have you frustrated, they'll have you wanting to pull your hair out, and they'll just be sitting there, they'll be fine. So how do we deal with students when they're defensive? One of the things we want to do, we have to be directive in this phase, okay? And this is where staff tends to struggle because a lot of times students know, especially an ODD student, when they're acting out and you say, listen, you need to calm down, they're testing you, right? You have to be directive, you have to be strong in your voice. You don't want to yell at them, but you have to say, listen, you need to stop this behavior because if you don't, then this is going to happen. We use like if and then, and I'll get more in detail on that. That's deeper. So if the student is acting out, they're being defensive, you'll say, listen, I know you're having a rough day. However, I need you to stop and focus. We can go for a walk. Because if you don't, then we're going to have to call the dean down. I don't want to call the dean down. However, I need you to follow directions. The kid says, screw you. I'm calling the dean, right? Call the dean. I don't care. All right? And then if you tend to not be directive, and you say, who are you talking to? You can't talk to me that way. What do you think you're talking? What's going to happen? It's just going to be an argument back and forth, and then the kid's going to frustrate you because now you're taking it personal. And one of the first things you talk about, don't take it personal, but be directive. And when you're directive and they still defy your order, you say, listen, if I was you and that happened to me, I would be upset. But listen, I know you. You're a great kid. Right now you're upset. I don't take anything you said personal. I'm trying to help you. Just reassure the kid again. Say, listen, I need you to follow this direction. If you do this, then we can move on. And sometimes that'll work. 9 out of 10 times that'll work because you have a relationship with the student. But when it doesn't, then you do have to go to the next step. You do have to get the dean. But the biggest thing is that we don't want you to take that personally and then get into a conflict and a back and forth with the student, and that just makes matters worse. Because then, depending on the student, they may even strike you. I worked in BOCES, so students would get physically aggressive with staff. We were, part of CPI, there's a physical component that we don't teach in district. We had to actually restrain the kids. We had to take them to padded rooms. So it does escalate to that situation, but we like to avoid that. And that's going to go on to the next topic is risk behaviors. So when a student is defensive, and they're not listening to you and they become threatening, right? That's when they're going to go into risk behaviors. And examples of risk behavior, that's hitting, biting, self-injury, throwing furniture, I've seen a lot of that, threatening staff or others. So in this situation, if this happens in district, right, in Farmingdale, this is when you call for security. You call for the security, you call for the principals, okay? Let us take over this situation because at BOCES, we actually had a support staff that would come in these situations and then they would physically intervene to keep that student safe and they would escort the student to like a padded room where that student would be able to come down. We're in district and if you need that level of care, you don't belong in the district setting. However, in our elementary programs, we do have smaller kids that are physical. They probably won't really hurt you. So that's why Farmingdale is really actually looking to bring CPI on officially, where those staff members will be trained on how to restrain students. In the lowest level, we're not talking about taking kids down with a mat, but these are little guys, but they still get physical. So, but if the students at the area where they're hitting themselves, self-injury, throwing furniture, threatening staff, that's when you really want to call in, your dean and your security. But so during this phase, how should staff respond? I actually told you, but I'm going to show you. Disengagement. This means now remove yourself from the conflict if the student is targeting or threatening you. This is so important. You have to take every threat seriously. And a lot of times as aides and monitors, you're the first one on the scene with the student, so they may just target you because they're displacing their anger on you. But if the student says, I'm going to hit you, You know, take that threat serious, step back. Don't say, don't you dare, there's no way you're gonna hit me. I've had principals, assistant principals, and BOCES staff members, the students say, you know, I'm gonna hit you. They say, you can't hit me, you're not gonna hit me, and the kid, bow, punches. Right? So you want to take every threat seriously, all right? Obviously, students should not punch staff members, but you don't want to challenge a student that's already heightened, that's already in that risk behavior. So if the student threatens you, you take all threats seriously. So that's one of the things that staff should do. Or if the student is just targeting you, and like, you know, you can't talk to me, you just say, hey, you're monitor, I don't have to listen to you. You know, get out of here, shut up. If they're being disrespectful to you to the point where your skin is boiling, because listen, we're all human, right? Then, when someone else comes on the scene, he says, listen, I have to leave because he's being disrespectful to me, or I'm causing him to be angry, so I'm going to remove myself from the situation so that he can calm down. And a lot of times, what will happen in these situations is when I come on a scene, or an administrator comes on a scene, and the staff member that was disrespected, and this little guy said this to me, and you wouldn't believe he told me where to go and how to get there, and he needs to be punished, he needs attention. And then they say that in front of the kid, and what do you think, how does the kid respond? The kid gets worse, right? The kid will say, yeah, I did say that, you need to get out of here, you get on my nerves, I hate you, right? So that is that de-escalated? No, that's escalating the student. If that student did disrespect that staff member and it was wrong, but in that situation, you just say, listen, I'm going to remove because he's upset with me. This is as a assistant principal in BOCES, I would sometimes be the first one on the scene. And the students would say, Mr. McCloud, I hate you, get out of here, I can't stand you. You know, it's your fault, right? Can you imagine that, right? Everyone loves Mr. McCloud, right? but if, as an authority figure, you know, so I'll say, listen, he's upset with me, this is what happened. I really want him to follow X, Y, and Z instructions, and then he'd go right back to class. But listen, he's upset with me, I'm gonna leave, I know you got a great report of him, he's a great kid, and I walk away. And 5 minutes later, that kid's back on track. They get back to class. Now, BOCES is a lot different. You know, we don't, you know, because the kids are there for a reason, right? We don't want to just punish them and keep them in, you know, detention all day. That kid does it, but while I'm there, I'm a challenge to them, right? I've got them in trouble. But once I leave and I say, and I let them know that he was a great kid, the kid hears that. They hear everything. So once I disarm myself, I said, listen, he's mad at me, he's upset with me, but he's a great kid. So that's how you should do it. And even though if you're frustrated, sometimes, listen, your skin's going to be boiling, you're not going to be able to do that. Just remove yourself from the situation and try not to escalate the student even more, even though they disrespect you. So that's one of the ways to handle a student when they have that risk behavior. Another way to do is, let's say if you're in the classroom and the students are dealing with the situation, the dean is in there now, the assistant principal, and the rest of the class is there. They're watching this unfold. You can just say to the teacher, listen, I'm going to take the rest of the class across the hall. We're just going to stay there. Remove that audience, okay? Because now once you remove the audience, a lot of times when kids are in trouble, what are they doing? They're showing off, right? They're showing off for everybody else in the classroom. And a lot of teachers, their biggest fear is like, if this kid gets away with this, everybody in the classroom is going to think they can do it, right? So the best thing to do is to let the teacher know, I'm going to take the rest of the kids across the hall. You know, and it'll only be for a few minutes. It's not like you got to teach them a lesson, but you're removing that audience. You know, if another dean comes up, they'll come over, they'll stay with you with the students. But the biggest thing is to remove that audience and then let the dean and let the principal and the teacher kind of de-escalate that student at that point. And now they don't have an audience. And now it says assess the risk behavior, engage when it's necessary to physically intervene. This piece you guys won't do again because this is, you know, not a building where we're going to physically intervene. That's what security would do. So let's say if security came in that room, that student now starts to throw staplers and they start to be unsafe, that's when they'll probably escort them out of the building. And if there's a psychiatric student, they may have to call the hospital and the student may have to go get evaluated. Okay? And now if you're ever alone, right, and call for help if the situation is escalating. You never want to do things and by yourself with a student just for, you know, liability reasons, but always call for help, okay? Never do this alone, okay? And the last piece, when a student has went through this phase, and a lot of times, you know, as a staff member, you may not see the tension reduction phase. This is the decrease in physical and emotional energy. This is the time when this occurs when the student begins to regain rationality. Okay, this is when they went through that entire cycle. They had anxiety, they were defensive, they exhibited risk behavior, they yelled, they cursed, they screamed. Now they're remorseful, they feel sorry. What do you think students start to do at this phase of behavior? Cry, exactly. Yeah, students start to cry at this phase. They feel very remorseful, okay? They're telling you that they're sorry. It says they're embarrassed, okay? Fears of sadness, crying, and apologizing. This is where, and if you're a part of this phase, the first thing you should do is you should say, yeah, you should feel bad. Should you do that? No, you don't want to do that, right? You want to say that, but no, you don't do that. You say, you know what? I get it. You're not upset at me. Listen, if that would have happened to me, I would have been just as upset. But now that you're back in rational thought, what could we have done differently so we don't arrive in this situation again? That's where you provide that therapeutic rapport, and that's what's on the last part. So at this stage of the game, staff should provide therapeutic rapport and reestablish communication, listen carefully, and debrief. This is where you'll probably be with your student again after they've gone through this crisis, and then you're probably at lunch or at recess and they're sitting there talking to you. This is where you really establish that relationship with that student, and you kind of give them skills so they can, when they go through this phase again, that they'll know, all right, I probably shouldn't curse you out. I probably should do this. I should have listened to you at first when I was going through anxiety and you told me to leave the classroom and walk away, right? Does this make sense to you all? Okay, yeah. So this really helps out, and a lot of times, is it easy? No. I've been doing this again for 9 years, and I'm probably the most calmest person. But there were students, and I have a few stories for you at the end, of students that actually upset me, and I had to remove myself from the situation because, even though I'm trained in this, but students, they know, like I said, an ODD student is undefeated. They will win every time if you get into a power struggle. So it's not even worth it. All right. So now, one of the things that I talked about was rational detachment. And basically, what rational detachment means is that, did I go too far? Hold on one second. Yeah, so rational detachment, that's basically where you want to not take anything personally. This you don't really have to write down, I'll just kind of talk. So precipitating factors are factors that influence behavior. These are internal and external causes of behavior where staff has little or no control. A lot of times what that means is that your student could just come in and they can just lose it, right? There's nothing, you can just say good morning and they'll snap on you. They'll say, what do you mean good morning? It's not a good morning, because we don't know what happened on the way to school. Something could have got them upset, and they start to take that anger out on you. So one of the things you have to do, you have to understand precipitating factors, and you need to depersonalize the crisis situation, recognizing that you are seldom the cause of the risk behavior. A lot of times when students lash out on you, you didn't do anything to deserve it, all right? And as a staff member, especially at aid and monitor, you care so much about your kids, right? And when they curse you out or when they yell at you, you're like, you little, right? I'm gonna keep it real with you guys, right? You're like, all this I do for you, so you take it personally. You should, because we love kids. That's why we do this, right? However, we don't want to say that out loud to the kids because there's probably something that they're going through, and they're just displacing that anger on you. It's nothing that you did to deserve it. And I don't want you to think that you should be a punching bag also. That's when we talk about being directive. Like, listen, I didn't deserve that. I know you're not upset with me. However, that's inappropriate the way to talk to me. You can't say that. That's perfectly fine because the kid knows that. But you don't want to say, are you talking to me like that? You want to take it out on them. So one of the things you want to do is you want to address the factors that lead to the crisis situation. You want to avoid becoming a precipitating factor yourself. And you also you want to know that there's possible external factors such as fear, anxiety, lack of self-esteem, a loss of personal control or power, trauma. A lot of these things contribute to why the students are feeling the way that they're feeling. Possible external factors, the physical environment, stimuli, these are all things that is why the students can behave the way. But this is, if you don't take anything from this course, I want you to take away this piece, which is rational detachment. The ability to manage your own behavior and attitudes and not take the behaviors of others personally. That is the key. That's why, throughout my career, I've been so successful with dealing with behavior and able to calm down students because I don't take it personally. Now listen, we're all co-workers, right? So if I cursed you out, right, that's different. If one of your colleagues cursed you out, you take that personal, right? That's different because we're on the same level, all right? We're adults. But we have to remember, we're dealing with children, and depending on what school you work at, we're dealing with babies, right? So they may say some mean and harsh things, but we have to remember, they're not on our level. They're not adults. So, and they don't know us personally. you know? A lot of times, and I won't say this on YouTube because it's a curse, but sometimes, especially behavioral students, they call the female staff, see you next Tuesday. That's what it is? Okay, all right, so that cuts at your soul, right? It really does, because it's so disrespectful, it's so hurtful.
It's a disrespect that's so hard.
That's right,
To act, to be like that.
That's right.
It's very difficult, and it's difficult to me.
Exactly.
To accept a kid being so disrespectful.
Yeah.
I wish I could learn that.
And that's good, because
That
that's,
ability.
yeah, and it takes time. So what she said on YouTube is that it's so hard to take disrespect from a youngster, from a young student, because a lot of us are old school. We grew up, you respect your elders, you do what you're told, right? Unfortunately, and the way we raise our kids, we still raise them that way, but unfortunately, not everyone raises their kids like we do, right? So it does hurt, it is disheartening. So this is a skill, it's not easy, right? But it takes practice, you know, because the first thing, you know, we're not used to being insulted, right? We're just not, especially by children. And then the pandemic made this 10 times worse. It's one of the reasons why Farmingdale hired me, because of my background and what was happening in district schools, right? So it's really difficult for us to take disrespect from students and not take it personal, because we're old school. We weren't raised that way. But we have to remember, all right, they're kids. I didn't do anything personally to understand this. But just getting back to the point where students would call staff members that to set them off on purpose. Then now that staff member is yelling at the kid, and the kid's just sitting there laughing. And I'll come on to the stuff. He's like, yeah, look, she's yelling at Ms. McCloud. They're not supposed to yell at me. So the kids are so manipulative, right? And they're like, well, what'd you say? Well, I called her that. I'm like, well, that's why. But still, she can't yell at me. So kids are so manipulative. They try to get the staff members in trouble because they know that they can set them off. So the biggest key here is you have to be able to rationally detach. It's easier said than done, but one of the things you want to do is you want to stay calm. It says that you may not be able to control the precipitating factors, but you can control how you react, how you respond. It may be hard, but you can control your own emotions. You have to maintain professionalism so you can manage the situation by responding appropriately. Don't take the behaviors of the personals. Find positive outlets to absorb negative energy. A lot of times when students say things that hurt your feelings, say, listen, I know you don't mean that, you know, I know you know how much I care about you. You're just upset. Even though if it hurts you, once you say that, you disarm that student, right? Because if they just called you a see you next Tuesday and you say, I know you don't mean that, they have nothing. You've taken their power away. But once you respond to that, you can't call me that. You can't want to tell your mom or tell your teacher. Now, you're going to tell the mom and the teacher, but you're not going to say it in front of them, right? So at that moment, you say, I know you didn't mean that, all right? Because if you don't, you're going to lose. Like I said, ODD students or just behavioral students are undefeated, because now they're going to get you to that level, your skin's boiling, you're yelling and screaming. We're going to come in, we're not going to know who's yelling at who started, you know. So that's the situation you want to avoid. But that takes patience, that takes time. But again, it just takes calmness. And then we're going back to the integrated experience. It's the concept where behavior influences behavior. The behavior and attitudes of staff impacts the behavior and attitudes of those in their care and vice versa. So you want to consider how your behavior impacts those that you're in care of, and you also want to treat those that you're in care of respectfully. And think about it. How would you feel if someone yelled at you, even if you were wrong, right? So we really don't want to yell at students because we don't like being yelled at, right? So imagine if our colleague, let's say we did something wrong, our colleague comes and yells at us. We don't want that. You know, we're going to yell right back, even if we know what we did was wrong. So that's why we really don't want to yell at students, even though they misbehave. We really want to be cognizant. We want to focus on the behavior and make objective decisions. So now one of the things I want to do is we kind of talked about the integrated experience, and I'm not going to repeat that because a lot of things. But what I want to do, the way we're going to wrap this up is I have a great video that I want to play for you all. And this video is going to kind of encompass everything that we just learned on how, you're going to see a situation. I'm not going to give it away at all, but you're going to see a situation where a teacher and a student have an interaction, and we're just going to see how, if they would have worked what we just learned, how the situation could have been different, but obviously they didn't do it, that's why I'm showing it to you. So I'll let you, I don't want to even give it away, so I'm going to unpack this video, we'll watch the video, and then we'll unpack it, okay? And if you guys have any questions, we'll have those at the end.
change the world, but I hope I'm making a difference. Here's all my early dismissal students across the street.
With summer coming, Madison Park's principal, Chuck McAfee, knows that some students find warm weather especially distracting.
Sir, what are you doing? It seemed like a good idea, but where do you really belong? All right, let's get there. Being the principal means being consistent, being fair, and about communication. Not a bad idea, though. You have to have a really good sense of humor to be successful with this. Show you. Watch right there. Okay, he's looking around. Walks right up. Look at this. What? He puts the gum right directly on the camera. Thinks that nobody's going to see him. That's unbelievable. Sometimes it's not always fun. These are young people, and so we do have rules. Let's go! No hats. Basic rule. We like to think that you're in school to learn. It's just one of the rules that we're trying to work with.
He took my hat. My hat was on the table. It was now on my head. Why would I walk around and put a hat on my head?
Let me go up and see him. You wait here.
This student is angry that his hat was confiscated by one of his teachers. A minor incident at some schools.
How we doing?
But at Madison Park, Chuck McAfee knows things can quickly spin out of control.
I put my hat on the table. Other teachers didn't have a problem with that. Why did he have a problem with it?
I really wish there was this going on here that I'm not getting.
It reflected me.
See, I'm trying to figure this out. There's always two sides of the story. I mean, I cannot imagine why someone comes down to my office about just his hat. If he wasn't wearing his hat,
Yeah.
why would the teacher take my hat? I don't know.
He had his hat. He left his hat in a place it wasn't supposed to be. I took his hat.
What's the point?
He doesn't really perform at any kind of acceptable level. He caught a real nasty attitude about it.
Why do I want to leave school?
Yeah, I know. He can relax about his hat and get his hat at the end of the school day.
Or you said at lunchtime?
Well, see, I'm at lunchtime. If I'm a nice guy, you don't treat me bad. When you leave here, yeah, he called me all kinds of names. He was swearing at me and everything before he was leaving. He called, no, you know me, but before he left here, I was all kinds of, MF, A, S type
Oh, I
stuff.
see. All right. How we doing? Come on. Please. How we doing? The longer you do this, you get a sixth sense. If I get it right, I'm going to find out the root of the problem. Now,
Here's my hat back.
all right, here's what I want to tell you. How old are you?
I'm 18.
And see, that's the tough part. And when you get 18, you're like grown, and it's hard to deal with you because you're a young adult.
If my hat was small enough to fit in my pocket, I would put it in my pocket. That he just trying to do this to show me that he got power over me, this and
That's
that.
what I thought it was. Honestly, you got upset. That's what I got. All right. I was trying to figure out what was this about. It's not about the hat. You feel like you didn't get that much respect. All right, come on. I want to try to keep you in school, so I got the point, the teacher got the point, you got the point, we have to straighten this out with your teacher.
That's what my hat.
Hold on, we're not finished, don't walk away.
Come on home, yo. Come on, man.
Don't go home over your hat. Hold on. I just know from experience, sometimes these little things can turn into bigger things if you don't do the right thing. This is your third high school. I'm trying to make sure that this year is somehow successful. Because you're going to get an education. All right, let me bring you over here. Let me go get your hat.
Principal McAfee convinces this angry student to sit down with the teacher who took away his hat and try to work it out.
Hi, this is Mr. Wilkins. I want these two people to communicate and solve their problem.
Anything to say? Yeah. How come you only decide to take my hat, comment on her hat on the table, and then rather than that, you could just be like, yo, Will, put the hat in the locker.
I don't like that tone. I don't like that tone.
That's not what you're gonna get.
No, that's not the tone I'm gonna get because you're not following the rules. If the hat is sitting on, I'm gonna say.
Where I come from, yo, adult, no adult, yo, if you're gonna treat somebody like that, how you expect me to talk to you?
Okay, Wilkins, here's the deal. Here's the deal. The rule is no hats. If I find out the rule is no hats.
Hey, yo, man, what the man? You really begin to piss me off. mouth off. You may have running your mouth, doing this thing, thinking that you're who's this and that. Listen to me closely, alright? I don't care about you. I don't give two about you. All I wanted was my damn hat. You have no right to take my hat off no table. If I put my hat on the table, you have to run to that will. I don't want the hat there. Put it in the locker. I don't put it in the damn locker. I gotta ask somebody so I can put it in the locker. You don't come to my business. Let go. Yo, don't put your hands on me. Yo. What the hell, man? What the hell, man?
It's a tough world out there for young people. They feel very vulnerable. When they feel disrespected, we're in a lot of trouble. They do things sometimes that don't make any sense.
Sometimes it's so easy.
You know, you're dealing with young people.
Didn't have to explode.
After his attempt to make peace between teacher and student backfires, Chuck McAfee has to clean up the mess.
You gotta see his hand. He needs a nurse. See his hand. He's gonna have to end up having to pay for this. This way.
When things really mess up, it's my fault.
Put your hand up.
The buck stops here.
Okay. What happened? I'm trying to talk to him, and he refused to let me talk. And then he get me aggravated because he's talking to me like I'm a first grader.
Right, so now you're aggravated. So then you turn around, get mad, and punch the window?
Yeah. He making it seem like I'm stupid.
Okay.
You need stitching.
I want to fix the window.
Listen, my mom can't pick out windows. I got 5 little brothers. And my mom worked at 2 jobs and she can't hardly pay the rent.
No, wait a minute. Then we'll probably talk about some kind of restitution. We'll find a way. All right?
Okay. It's very hard to be a teacher because they deal with everything. But they got the heart to do this.
I thought this one was going to be an easy one. What happened?
He had a tone that I didn't like, and I mentioned it. And he went left, and he went bad, and I feel real bad. I mean, I'm like...
I know. Let me have this. I thought this one would have been an easy one. I don't know what the conversation was, but I know that nobody likes to feel good when kids get angry and put their hands to windows.
Yes, sir.
All right, so, I don't know. It's about communication. Sometimes we hit it, sometimes we don't.
But if they end up doing this, then we lose.
Yeah, that's all. Well, no. My mistake. I thought we could work this out. Sometimes it doesn't work. Damn.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Wow, right? Okay, so did you guys see kind of like the whole this defensive, aggressive behavior, right? De-escalation, tension reduction, anxiety, right? We saw every phase. So how do we think the teacher responded? Did the teacher act appropriately? Everyone's shaking their head and saying no, right? What were some of the things that the teacher did?
I think he was antagonizing him. Like he said, these are the rules or whatever, and he could have went about it. He said it in a calm way. I don't know how, because that's still something I'm learning.
Someone's gonna teach you.
Yeah, so they're saying that the teacher could have been a little more calmer. He was more kind of antagonizing, more escalating the student. He didn't recognize how the student was feeling. He didn't validate the student's feelings.
I think the kid felt very targeted. Like maybe they.
She says she thinks the kid felt targeted.
Maybe they've had past history. Maybe there's something.
Yeah, because he mentioned another kid and you didn't yell at her, you yelled
Yeah.
at me.
Kids know that.
Well, this is an everyday thing. After a while, a teacher can do so much.
Yeah, the teacher was very frustrated.
Every day, a teacher is like overwhelmed.
But do you think any teacher would want that situation to unfold like it did?
No.
Not at all,
And
right?
after a while, a student like this, I would say now let the parent take over. Now, I would say let the parent teach the kid at home.
See, now that's a typical response. However, was that kid 100% in the wrong?
No.
right? So when we're going back, and not to discount what you said, because the kid does have, obviously has behavior issues, right? But not to discount what you said, but however, that student, right, and the way he responded was what we just talked about, the integrated experience, correct? Now, if we would have dealt with that student the way that we just were trained, do you think the situation would have turned out differently? I think so, right? If the principal, like, and there was a lot of missteps here, because when the principal said, okay, I get it, you get it, he gets it. Did the kid get it? Was the kid ready to sit down and mediate? Was that mediation even done properly? Absolutely not. He should have stayed. Exactly. You never. That's right, because the first thing that happened was when the student came in, what did the teacher say to him? What do you got to say? Something like to that point. Yeah, what do you have to say now? You know, was he a warm and like accepting, and he didn't follow any of the things that we just learned, correct? So that's where the most important piece about this is the integrated experience, how our behavior influences their behavior. And again, the student, he cursed at the staff member, he blew it, he broke a window, right? He was disrespectful. However, we see how. You saw it unfold, right? You just see it unfold right in front of you. And a lot of times that's what happens in our buildings here. Probably not to that level, but a lot of times the student, it was just something over simple of a hat, right? Something as simple as a hat. But you know, that's what we're trying to get to. And then when the principal was like, you got to pay for that window, I just want to strangle him. Like, you know, and then the kid was like, then he told you his situation. Remember when I said that? That's right. And remember, I think I said that our kids, all the families don't raise their children like we do. We don't know when our students go home, we don't know what environment they go into. Some are going to great environments, right? And but some are going into a lot of broken homes. Some are going to unstable environments. So when they come in and they displace that anger, that's why I want you as a staff member not to take it personal, not to be, it said be non-judgmental, right? And those are some of the things that the pieces, those little things that if we just change that, we can avoid situations like this happening. So what CPI is really common sense, all bottled up very nicely, right, in a great package. But it lets you know, that's why I love showing this video, and I hope they never take it down, by the way, because then I have to find another one. But it's just so great because it hit on every single piece of how to deal with students and what happens when you don't deal with them, right? When they have other videos of how staff intervenes, but those are kind of like scripted. This was raw. This was actually part of like a real documentary. This wasn't scripted at all. But that way, you know, the way you handle it, the way you bring it, your behavior influences the student's behavior, and vice versa. And then the last piece of the video, the principal was providing therapeutic rapport when he really found out, oh wow, you know, we'll find out some restitution. And I'm sure that they'll have a follow-up. And the principal really wants that kid to stay. Obviously, he's a troubled kid, like we said, 5 high schools, and that had to be like a tough high school. There were police officers in that school, right? So, you know, I don't want you to leave this thinking that we're letting kids just run over us and do whatever they want. No, that's not the thing. We want to utilize all the strategies and techniques we learned today that'll really help us really manage these situations. So I hope this was helpful. I hope I lived up to the hype. And those of you on YouTube, what we want to do in the future is we want to, like I said, the next phase of this we'll go in a little more in depth. So this was actually Unit 1, and I believe there's 7 units. So if I can teach this again, and if you take it, we'll go into the next level, and we'll do. So thank you all so much. Those of you on YouTube, those of you right here in my own building, thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. Thank you.